Hey, welcome back to WCHS, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to do the second half of the released items from 2018, and we're going to do these questions to hopefully highlight some big rocks and highlight some recurring formulas to how they're asking these questions, and maybe gain some strategies and some confidence. All right, so number 32. Because I've previously done the first 31. The supporter of a free market economy. So I would pause, and if I had a paper copy, I might just put Adam Smith's name above that, right? So Adam Smith, and I pause and start thinking about, okay, Adam Smith, he wants a free market, no regulation, laissez-faire, all of these things, right? I pack that stuff in my mind, and then I continue. Would likely respond to the situation identified in the Times. So I'm going to have to go and look at the Times in a second. But I'm going to contrast the answers first. Approval, because an outbreak of disease would target a specific industry. That doesn't sound like Adam Smith at all. So this is going to be interesting. Disapproval, because the common good is disregarded in favor of an elite. Adam Smith doesn't care about the common good, right? Common good, pages 75 to 80, whatever the hell, 71 to 85, I keep talking about it all the time. Most important pages of the textbook. That I swear some of you have never looked at. Common good is not associated with capitalism. So if you pick B, you're picking B because you haven't done the work. C, disapproval, because society functions best when all members are subject to the same regulations. Adam Smith doesn't want regulations. So unless those same regulations mean no regulations, then who's picking C? Approval, because those who are able to pay for priority treatment should have the opportunity. If I can pay more, I should be able to go first in line and get private health care, right? Sounds like capitalism. Those with the money, what directs the distribution, right? The three basic economic questions, who to allocate it to? Well, who has money? D is the only one that sounds anything like capitalism to me. Now I'm going to actually check the source. Now that I've differentiated, contrasted the answers, thought about it, so the Times. Pro sports teams arranges private vaccination clinic for players. Smith would say that's okay. They have enough money. They should get these vaccines before others. D's my answer. D's got to be the answer. Yes. D's got to be the answer. What did I do there? I began with the supporter of free market, and I said, you know what? Let's think of Adam Smith. Make it a little more clear to myself. And then I went through the options, and I went back to the values of this ideology. You're guaranteed to see capitalism, laissez-faire, free market economy, Adam Smith on your diploma, on our field tests. It's one of the big rocks of the course. If you're not ready to be tested on this big rock, you're not ready to pass the course. Good news, we have another section next semester. Number 33. People in agreement with the policy identified in the Herald, I'm not going to go read it yet, I'm going to still contrast, would most likely support liberalism, okay? Collectivism, okay, these are the two opposites, these are the two big themes of the course. There's that T-chart that we did right at the beginning of the course about their values and policies. Conservatism, all right, that's a little bit of a different word, that means status quo. Individualism, well wait a minute, A and D are the same answer. Individualism, liberalism, it's the same answer. I can't be stuck between A and D. They both can't be right. I can't pencil in both. So now I'm thinking it's got to be B. It's the opposite of A and D. So this is a course on ideologies. You're going to be tested on ideologies. You have to be able to contrast these ideologies, their values, their beliefs, their worldview. Liberalism is an individualist ideology, economically, politically. So unless there's something weird happening here, I'm still going to check. If it talks about status quo, the answer is C. If it talks about the common good, collective responsibility, equality, that kind of stuff, it's B. It better not be one of A and D, because they're too similar. Public Health Board makes vaccination mandatory. Common good. We're doing this for the common good. It's B. It'd only be C if it's like Public Health Board says, let's continue to do things as we've always done them. Status quo, right? It's not what it reads. It's talking about prioritizing the common good. We can infer that. It's implicit in the source. That's why public health care is doing this. Public health is also an example of economic socialism, which is also collectivism. So there's the social collectivist nuance of the common good. We're doing this for the health of the community health, but there's also the economic collectivism part of social welfare. I'm going B. Using information in both newspaper headlines. Now, I struggle with questions like this, so I'm going to slow down a little bit. Using information in both headlines, which of the following questions could most effectively be researched? So for those of you coming from the -1 stream, this is similar to doing an A1 relationship paragraph, where you have to come up with overarching thematic questions that they share. Similar skill. But it's way simpler because the sources are like one line. Pro sports teams, private vaccines, public healthcare, mandatory vaccines. Should governments intervene in healthcare issues? Public healthcare makes vaccination mandatory. So the Herald has a poll to an A. So I might put an A next to the Herald. Pro sports teams arrange private vaccine clinics for players. Should governments intervene in healthcare issues? So in the Times, it's not government providing it, it's this private clinic. Does it make us ask the question, maybe government should be providing this and maybe for everyone instead of just pro sports teams? Maybe. So I might put an A by the Herald and maybe an A with a question mark by the Times. It might fit, but I'm going to keep looking just in case there's a better one. I'm not just going to circle A and move on. Should individuals be able to refuse medical treatment? Well, the word mandatory makes me think of refusing, but that's the only reference potentially to refuse. So that's at an arm's length. So that's a maybe for the Herald, a no for the Times. So B is not my answer. Should governments provide publicly funded health care? At an extension, that's in both as well. So I might have to come back to A and C and see which one's better. Because at an extension, should governments provide publicly funded health care? Yes, but is A better? I'm going to have to come back to it. Should individuals purchase private health care coverage? Public Health Board, private vaccinations. C and D are similar, but C is more purposeful to the source. So between C and D, I'm gonna rule out D. Now I gotta contrast A and C. This is a tough one. I'm sure the province struggled on it. Should governments intervene in healthcare issues? Should governments provide publicly funded healthcare? Now, again, I don't have a key in front of me. I may get it wrong. The reason why I'm going to pick A over C is because it's very specific to vaccines. And vaccination, we can infer that there's a healthcare issue. There's some kind of pandemic or an epidemic. Does that fall under the umbrella of public versus private healthcare? Of course it does. But most effectively, based upon the language of the two, we can look at healthcare issues of pandemics. Because they both very specifically talk about vaccinations, I'm picking A over C. C is also discussed here, but more effectively, we could talk about healthcare issues like in light of an epidemic or a pandemic, should government intervene? Here, sports teams, because there's some kind of pandemic, they have to go to a private clinic. Here, because of a healthcare issue, a government's intervening. I'm going to go with A. I can see why people might pick C. It's going to be A, though, because it's more specific, and it's identified there and there. I'm going to pause for a second and ask you, did I get that one right? Because I can see how there's a division there. Whew! Woo! That's a tougher one, right? But do you see how I ended up getting A? Because they both specifically mentioned the vaccination, I went with healthcare issue. Let's go 35. To-do list. I don't want to look at the source. I almost messed up. Which of the following groups would likely be concerned with achieving the goals on the list? Trade unionists. Pause and think about what does that mean. Trade unionists, you work, but you've collectively organized, right? There's collective bargaining. So you probably live in a mixed economy like Canada. You might be, different people in Canada belong to unions. Teachers have an association. It's kind of like a union. Free trade activists. Those are different. Those are different things I'd be looking for. Free market advocates. Well, B and C are pretty similar, right? Free market means I really like capitalism. Free trade, I want capitalism globally. So B and C, it could be, like our last one, could be trying to find that nuanced difference between them. Communist revolutionaries. So they want violence, right? They want everybody to be equal. Let's get violent. Let's overthrow. If it's communist revolutionary, the to-do list should be like, kill my boss, right? Take over the factory, create a dictatorship of the proletariat. If it's A, the trade unionist, it's like collective bargaining, negotiate for, collective benefits, stuff like that. Implement workplace safety laws. Well, a free market enthusiast might not like that if it's going to interfere with profit. Ensure protection from being fired unfairly. Again, free market enthusiasts, they want to be able to fire you whenever this is interfering with profit. So the idea of fair to them is, if I fire you and I make more profit, then it's fair for me. So I'm beginning to rule out B and C. Establish health and dental benefits. If I'm your employer, I don't want to have to pay more for you to be my employee. Whether or not you have clean teeth probably doesn't impact my profitability, how much revenue I make based upon you. So I've all but ruled out B and C, but I'm also, in terms of communist revolutionary, I'm not seeing anything like, kill my boss. I'm seeing some things that trade unions might want, but I'm not seeing kill my boss. Secure, stable wages. It's A. So I first read the question. I contrasted the answers. Many of you are like, I always get it down to 2, but I can't get the right one. It's because you're not contrasting the answers. How is A different than D? Well, D and A are similar in that they're both kind of collectivist, right? They're on the collectivist side, economically speaking. There's a big difference, though. Violence. If you pick D, then you're not understanding communist revolutionaries, or you didn't contrast them enough with A. Do the work, and the answer's there. To a supporter of capitalism, the goals listed would be considered, not good, right? A capitalist isn't going to want these because it's going to cost them revenue. It's going to cost them profit because they're going to have a higher cost of their labor. So probably undesirable. Undesirable because an ideal collectivist state will ensure that everyone's needs are met. Undesirable because everyone's needs are met. They don't want an ideal collectivist state, so I don't even think that A makes sense. Desirable because the achievement of these goals would be, because without the achievement, the goals, the workers would be abused. Capitalists don't always care about the abuse of their workers. In fact, many capitalists do abuse workers. So not B. Desirable because an economic collapse would be devastating to the working class. If the working class is devastated, then I can pay them less. I don't really care, right? Unless the working class are my consumers, how does that benefit me? So it's not C. Undesirable because achievement of the goals would restrict profit. That's a golden answer. What do capitalists want? They want profit. Not hard at all. Not hard at all. But there's steps involved at breaking down the source. And you're guaranteed to see capitalism and communism and trade unions. I would argue that the economic part of your tests are the easier part of the test, because there's only a handful of ideologies to contrast here, and they make sense in contrasting of each other. Capitalism versus communism, individualism versus collectivism. All right, number 37, the student is criticizing an economic idea that is associated with fascism, capitalism, communism, laissez-faire. Well, because I've learned the words of the course, I know that B and D mean the same thing. So I cross them off. Can't be both of them. So it's neither of them. Now I have a 50-50 chance. Are they criticizing fascism or communism? So economically, I think back to Hitler and fascism. Still have private property, but it's regulated by the state. Communism. We have public property that's commanded and centrally planned by the state. It is ridiculous to suggest that all workers should receive the same pay. Do all students get the same grade in a course? People should be rewarded based upon how hard they work and the skills that they have. Student is criticizing an economic system, or an economic idea, sorry. So what is the idea? I have to find the idea. The idea is this equal pay, right? So do we get equal pay under fascism or communist system? Even though it didn't happen to actually be equal pay in the Soviet Union, Karl Marx does say, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. Therefore, whether you're a surgeon and I'm a taxi cab driver, if our needs are the same, then we should be paid the same. This is criticizing that same thing of equal pay. It's communism. It's communism. Because I understand communism is about egalitarianism, and fascism is certainly not. And this is a criticism of egalitarianism. The student is criticizing an economic idea. I just have to figure out what is the idea. And then say which system is that idea connected with. Relating language to the course is all we've been tested on so far. Making a web of all the interconnectedness of your words will unlock very high scores on multiple choice. Very high scores. But you notice another thing I'm doing is, if I know I have it right, I'm just going to put a little check mark by that, or happy face, and I'm never going to look at that question again. I'm not going to go back and re-question one that, I might double check it. Okay, wait a minute, the student is criticizing economic idea. Okay, the idea is egalitarianism, associated with communism. Yeah, no, I have it. Check mark, never look at that again. Because some of you go back and change answers. You go from a right answer to a wrong answer. Which of the following statements summarizes the position of the student? An economic system should encourage individual initiative. Well, the student is pro-capitalism. A is pro-capitalism. So that might be the answer. So if you struggle on multiple choice and you're not following along with me right now, then government should tightly regulate the economy. Regulating the economy is anti-individualism. This is a pro-individualist. Can't be B. An economic system should encourage collectivism. This is an individualist. It can't be C. Government should work closely with businesses and unions to increase the average standard of living. An individualist doesn't want unions and big government. The only answer it could be is A. If you don't get A for 38, you really shouldn't exit the course. You should retake it. It should be pass-fail. Because really, you don't get ideologies then. You haven't learned it. And I don't want my doctor to kind of know stuff, but kind of not. So then I die. I don't want my police officer to kind of understand stuff, but kind of not. So I die. "39. Supporters of socialism would most likely use this cartoon as evidence to argue that capitalist policies prevent individuals from seeking personal goals." Socialists aren't in favor of us seeking our personal goals. Capitalism is about, individual incentive and stuff. So unlikely to be A. B, would argue that capitalist policies maintain a minimum standard of living for citizens. That sounds like a good thing. C, encourage economic growth and innovation in society. That definitely sounds like a good thing. So why would a socialist be saying capitalism is a good thing? Increase economic disparity between high and low, high earners and the rest of society. So that is a criticism of capitalism. A is a criticism of capitalism. D is a criticism of capitalism. C is definitely not. And it depends upon how you phrase the term maintain a minimum standard of living for citizens. Now I'm looking at the cartoon. Middle class, house is falling apart, says please help. Says middle class. There's not a lot on the page. Prevent individuals from seeking personal goals. So there's nothing about capitalism saying you can't go and get that new car you want, or capitalism standing in the way of you having that trip that you want to. Maintain a minimum standard of living for citizens. Well, it's showing the middle class, not showing all citizens, not showing that no citizens falling beneath something. That's the way that I would draw it. So I have to consider, how would I draw it if that's the answer? Encourage economic growth, that's the worst answer. We're not seeing growth, we're seeing, not even stagnation, but collapse, right? The house is falling apart. Increase disparity between high income earners and the rest of society. The reason why I think it's D is because it says middle class. And middle class is purposely labeled on the cartoon to differentiate between what? Well, in this case, maybe the high class. We can infer that the cartoonist is suggesting that the high class doesn't need help because their house isn't falling apart. This house is falling apart because there's economic disparity, a gap between the rich and the poor, the haves and the have-nots, and the disparity is being illustrated by the fact that the house is falling apart. That's why I think it's D. I might put a question mark by it and come back to it. I'm not 100% confident, but that's where I get to D at the moment. But this might be one that I'll come back to, but I'm thinking it's D based upon that. 40, from the perspective of a democratic socialist. Okay, so socialist means that they like egalitarianism, that they like people to be more equal economically, but democratic. It's not a dictatorship. We can do this through government. Like modern liberalism, but even a little more socialist. When I see democratic socialism, I think of the NDP in terms of our country. The solution to the situation. How do we solve the problem of the middle class getting more poor? Redistribute wealth? Sure sounds like the NDP. Let's tax the rich and give to the poor. How can that not be the answer? I'm going to have to keep looking. Privatize major industries. No. That would be from the perspective of a capitalist. Attract foreign investors. That'd be from the perspective of a global economic, capitalist, an economic liberalist, right? Somebody that believes in free trade. Reduce the role of government. That's also a capitalist. We have a 3-1 split. B, C, and D are all economic individualism, all capitalism. A is my only answer. There's not a way you get that one wrong if you can differentiate between economic individualism and collectivism, if you know the difference. I understand that you can get nervous on tests, especially if you have a pattern of failure. But if I believe in each and every one of you, then you bloody well better too. Because I don't believe in everybody, but I do believe in you. All right, number 41. Which of the following titles is appropriate for this diagram? I don't often do well on this, right? I don't like the format of the question, but I know we're going to get questions like this. So I need practice with it. Which of the following titles is appropriate? So it is still kind of like here's 4 things. What's one thing they all have in common, right? It's similar to an A1 in the -1 stream, overarching thing. But sometimes I do struggle on these, so I have to slow down. Public attitudes encouraged by leaders of dictatorial states. So if it's A, I'd expect to see obedience, submission, loyalty to the state, this awestruck, this God-struck thing about the leader. Because I struggle at this, I might go back 1-to-1 here. I might look at A and then look at the things. Low voter turnout, cynical attitudes about elected people, negative public opinion about various political parties. If I'm a leader of a dictatorial state, there is going to be no other political party. Little citizen interest in political issues. Yeah, I'm okay with that. But I might actually have high voter turnout to say, look how great McBride is. Cynical attitudes about elected politicians. I don't want them to be cynical of me. I want them to be, afraid of how much they love me to take something from the office, right? A cult to the leader scenario. I don't think it's A. B, threats to the effective functioning of a democratic state. Apathy hurts democratic states. Yes, it does. Cynical attitudes, sure. Negative public opinion, sure. Little citizen interest, sure. B sure sounds a lot better than A. Historical origins of Canada's parliamentary democracy. What? Hopefully nobody in the province picks C. If you guys are looking at the answer, hopefully a very low attraction is C. Because, historical origins of Canada's parliamentary democracy, what's the connection? I don't see that at all. Political life in Germany under Hitler's dictatorship. Again, that might be, submission, low voter turnout. We know that he had high voter turnout in November 1933. So it's not D. We ruled out C as horrible. It's B, right? It has to be B. But for that one, I had to do it one at a time because I struggle at that kind of question. So I approached it a little differently. I read A, and then I contrasted it. Then I read B, and it's going to take me longer. But because there's an added nuance there that I struggle with, I had to slow the question down. 42. Source 1 depicts American efforts in the late 60s to assist people suffering from a natural disaster. I'm thinking of the course. I'm trying to think of what disaster happened in the late 60s. I don't know. Support a rebellion fighting for human rights? Well, they didn't do much in Czechoslovakia, so I don't see that being the answer. Contain the spread of communism. Yeah, they were busy doing containment. This is Cold War. Eliminated a fascist government. Not too many fascists left in the 60s. So it's probably going to be C. Looking at the source 1, we're in Vietnam. Why are we in Vietnam? Contain communism. C is my answer. Pretty straightforward. That, we could study Vietnam for, 100 hours and look at every operation and each policy and mandate and stuff like that. But for the sake of this course, there's not a lot we need to know. Vietnam, containment. That is one of the things we need to know. Source 2 implies that the American involvement in Vietnam was primarily motivated by, interesting, obligations to support corporations facing external threats, obligations under international trade agreements, a desire to support the spread of democracy, a desire to benefit economically. So now I look at this question and I'm like, well, you know what? When we talked about Vietnam in class, we didn't talk about economics. And I could use that as an excuse to not get the right answer. But it really has nothing to do with how we studied Vietnam in class. It said source 2 implies. The answer is in source 2. I just have to analyze the source. And that's something we've been doing since grade 10. So, source 2, American influence in Vietnam, mid-1990s, Pizza Hut, Exxon, Kinko's, Denny's, 7-Eleven, yada, 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 right? Remember when they would just come to burn our villages? So it's the idea that, we fought against America, militarily in the 60s and 70s. But now the Americans, they're taking over economically, right? Obligations to support corporations facing external threats. Well, it's not like they came to the rescue of McDonald's. Obligations under international trade agreements. I don't see any reference to any trade agreements there. But what I do see is that now in the 90s, America is benefiting economically. They don't care about democracy. They don't care about the democracy part. They care about the, you know what, can we make money off of Vietnam? So it has to be D. 44, a message most directly suggested by source 2. Large corporations are imposing a high standard of living on developed. I don't know. Can we infer that they have a high standard of living? Are they driving like a Mercedes car? I don't know if they are. Refugees from war-torn countries. There's no refugees in the source. No poll to B. Global peace is promoted through cooperation between big business and government. Powerful countries can exploit less powerful. USA exploits Vietnam by means other than military, economic. USA exploiting Vietnam by a non-military means, by an economic means. D is my answer. Logically think out the answers. 45. Which of the following titles is most appropriate for the two sources? Interesting. Global trends from ideological confrontation. Ideological confrontation. Our ideology, capitalism. Your ideology, communism. Yes. To economic liberalization. Free trade. Free access to markets. Absolutely, it's A. You know, I'll still consider the other ones, but that's what they're showing. International interaction from détente. Well, I don't see détente up here. International interaction from isolationism to brinkmanship. Don't see that. From imperialism to environmentalism. There's no reference to environmentalism. There's no cue to that. There's no cue to this or that. There's no cue to this. It can only be A. The other answers are horrible answers. There's no viable pull to them. I would argue, maybe to the detriment, that the exam you're going to have is more straightforward than the exams you've seen this year. Less challenging. Now, 46 to 57, need north source. I'm going to get rid of that page, bring up that one. And sadly, these are the questions that as a school we perform most poorly on, are the discrete questions. So we do need practice here. So I'm glad that there's a few at the end of the test. In the context of modern day Canada, so the country I live in, so I should know a little bit about it, which of the following situations would most likely be considered a demonstration of extremism? So I have to look at the four options and say which one is extremism in Canada. Seems like a pretty easy test. A special interest group publicly threatens to harm high-profile politicians. So if Mr. McBride and my whatever my special interest group is going to be called, we hate Trudeau. We publicly say that if Trudeau comes to town X, we're going to inflict bodily harm to him. That seems pretty extreme. Seems pretty violent. A is probably my answer. I'm going to look at the other ones, but there's the threatens public harm, right? Threatens to harm. That's the pull to the word extreme. That's fairly extreme. That's not the way we communicate politically in Canada. A political party wins all the seats despite winning only 63%. That's not extremism. That's a problem with our electoral system. A provincial official opposition leader is suspended for a day for calling the premier a liar. Our premier has been a liar. And she has been called a liar. And it's the job of the opposition to call them liars when they're lying. So I'm actually surprised that they get suspended for a day. But that's not extreme. A national lobby group launches a series of ads harshly critical of the federal government's policies. That's the job of a lobby group. Hold the government accountable. Sometimes to inform us. The only thing extreme is threatening to harm. A. 47. An environmentalist would most likely support which of the following actions? Subsidizing companies installing solar panels. How is A not the answer? How is A not the answer? Environmentalist supports what? A policy that's going to help the environment. A. That's a slap to the face, obvious answer. I'm going to look at BCD just in case I'm underthinking the question. Increasing spending to improve highways. Where's the connection to the environment? Unless we're going to make highways more environmentally friendly. Reducing business taxes charged to oil corporations. Environmental companies are usually anti-oil. Not like, hey, let's let oil make more money. Removing limitations placed upon weekly household garbage disposal. You know what? Put out more garbage. Let's just fill the landfills up. That doesn't make sense either. The only thing that makes sense is A. It's got to be A. So I still looked at the other ones, just in case. But it's definitely A. I reread it. Environmentalist would most likely. Okay, good. It doesn't say least likely. And then there's my answer. Many Canadians would consider themselves active, global, responsible citizens, have pressured their government to discontinue trading with China. Why would we, as global citizens, responsible citizens, say let's not trade with China? There's lots of reasons to not trade with China. But global citizenry means I have a responsibility, a moral obligation to the plight of the Chinese. Why? Because the government of China is abusing them. Human rights, genocide, those types of things. That's what, I've covered up the answers. That's what I anticipate the answer to be. A, Canada has historically refused to trade with communist countries. Canada imports more from China than China imports from Canada. Well, that just is from an economic standpoint, not a global citizenship. It's avoiding that global, responsible global citizen part, right? The Chinese government has shown limited respect for human rights. There's my answer. Chinese have not repaid loans to us. That's the only one with the link to responsible citizens is C. Please take your time when you're writing tests. The answer's there. But once you're done with it, put a check mark, move on. 49, from the perspective of Americans, the main reason the Soviet Union became allied with the Cubans. From the perspective of America is key to the question. It's not what was the main reason, it's from the perspective of America. So from the perspective of Cuba, it might have been that they needed defense. From the perspective of the Soviets, it might have been that you're our communist brothers. But from the perspective of America, why did the Soviets and Cuba become allies? That's the part you highlight from the perspective of. And you're going to see tons of questions that begin with statements like, from the perspective. That is the most common way of asking these questions. It's very simple. So from the perspective of the United States, the Soviet Union became allied with Cuba to improve relations with the West. Cuban Missile Crisis sure didn't look like things are getting better. It's not A. If you picked A, then again, you need to repeat. Prevent Cuba from suffering financial collapse? No. America's not saying, well, Soviets came in to help Cuba. No. Soviets came in to screw us over, right? They came in to threaten us. So it's not B. Gain a strategic position. Yep. Yeah, that's it. To get close to us. To violate my hemisphere. To get within, 90 miles of the Florida coast, right? Ensure the Cuban government held democratic elections? No. The only one from the American perspective is C. Because America didn't like this happening. It's a threat to them. 50. Which of the following events in Canadian history demonstrates most directly that even in a democracy, there are times when authoritarian methods are used? I cover up the answers. And I think about when did authoritarian methods get used in Canada. I think of the War Measures Act, the internment of Japanese, the internment of Austrians and Ukrainians, the FLQ crisis, the War Measures Act there. I think of the recent anti-terrorist legislation in Trudeau and the trucker convoy. I think of government saying, we know you have human rights, but we're gonna suspend them. That's what I anticipate the answer to be. Now I take my hand off and I look at the answers, and B's right there, right? B's right there. There's the answer I thought it would be. Pretty simple. 51. Which of the following actions challenges the ideas of capitalism? Which of the following actions highlight the term challenges? Challenges capitalism. Reducing taxes on businesses. That doesn't challenge capitalism. That says let's have more capitalism. Expanding free trade, that's more capitalism. Privatizing, that's more capitalism. Imposing environmental regulations against capitalism. D is my answer because I know the word regulation. Took 8 seconds. I'm moving on. Which of the following pairs of approaches to political decision making most strongly reflects will of the people? Cover up the answers. Think will of the people. I think plebiscites. I think referendums. I think elections. I think of democracy. I reveal the answers. Right away I see authoritarianism. The word jumps out, C and D. I cross both of those out. It's not authoritarianism. It's the opposite. Consensus decision making and representative democracy. Consensus decision making and direct democracy. I don't want to give the middle finger to the camera right now, but like this is tough. A and B are very similar, right? A and B are similar. You're actually making me think when all those other questions seem so easy. 52, now I got to think. There's a pull to A, there's a pull to B. But there's a better pull to one of them. And the better pull is B, because in B, we get to express our will more directly. But man, oh man, is there a pull to A. You know, if I didn't read B, C, and D, I would have just picked A and moved on, and I would have gotten it wrong. But it's B because under direct democracy, the people's will is directly expressed. Under representative democracy, the will is funneled through your elected politician. Will is still there, but there's more will in B. So, which of the following pairs reflects the will of the people? A is the right answer. But most strongly, B is better than A. And that's why most strongly is highlighted. So that you differentiate between A and B. But man, oh man, is there a pull to A? Can you guys look at the provincial results? Did a lot of people pick A? How many people picked A? 44%. How many people picked B? But B's right, right? So B's right, more people picked A. I'm showing you how you get questions wrong here. More people got this one wrong than right. This is a hard question. It looks easy. Like you might read it, see A and pick A and just keep going. You're almost at the end of the test. Then you get it wrong. Still got to slow down, read the question, consider each option, differentiate. Why would A be better than B or B better than A? B's better than A because there's more will there. Direct democracy, right there. This question, this is one of the hardest you're going to see. Very rare that more people get a question wrong than right. And it's very rare that more than half the people get it wrong. This is one of the hardest questions you'll see. It's easy if you take your time and do the steps. You know, I ruled out C and D right away because authoritarianism doesn't fit. Now I'm down to A and B, but then I have to contrast. The only thing different between A and B is representative versus direct democracy. Then I have to think, critically think. How is one more reflective of the will of the people than the other? They both reflect the will. How does one reflect the will more than the other? Taking the time, I found the answer. 53. Which of the following is an example of political participation? So I'm thinking voting, right? What else do you do? Maybe talk to your MLA. MLA Scott Sinclair is going to come visit us in early January. Hanging out with him, asking questions. That's cool too. Rick Wilson, maybe MLA Rick Wilson, maybe you write him a letter. That's being engaged politically. I don't know. Donating money to a private charity. I mean, there's a social cause there. There's an economic cause. There could be a political nuance if the donating money is under the umbrella of a certain party, but I don't see it. I'm not ready to say no, but I'm certainly not ready to say yes. Volunteering, A and B are basically saying the same thing. Right? Not really that different. Canvassing door to door for a medical cause. Canvassing door to door for the United Conservative Party, or whatever the heck they call themselves today. Yeah, that would be political, but for a medical cause? No. Collecting, and I can't say the word, names, to petition against a proposed bylaw. Yeah, that's political. A petition against a bylaw. Canvassing does sound political until you look at the cause. Volunteering could be political, but not with that cause. That's a social cause, not political. Donating money, again, social and economic, that's a socioeconomic action. The political one is the last one because it's connected to a policy or a law that's being proposed. And a petition is something that citizens can do. 54, in Canada, a person who favors individualism over collectivism. Again, this is the course. I got to get this one right. I have to get this one right. Favors individualism over collectivism would most likely, I'm going to read it a couple of times, make sure I'm not misreading it, because it's easy. I don't want to, fly through and get it wrong. Favor policy deregulation. Individualists want to deregulate. Yes, they do. A is my answer. I'm going to look at the other ones. Support the expansion of social programs. No, that's collectivism. Nationalization, that's collectivism. Encourage government involvement, that's collectivism. 3-1 split, collectivist towards individualist. A is my only individualist. A is my answer. You need to know the language of the course. You can't be doing this on the diploma exam. What does deregulation mean? Means you didn't pass the class. Means you didn't understand the course. Production and distribution decisions in the Soviet Union were made primarily by the government. Gosplan, A. I don't know what the 6 is about, but it's definitely government. It's Gosplan, central planners. 56, which of the following actions is considered a violation of the Charter? Religious group organizes demonstration. Well, the demonstration could be legal, and they have the right to assembly, so that's probably not it. Radical group delivers promotional material through a mass mail-out. The word radical makes me want to say it's B, but getting mail can be like a nuisance, but there's nothing illegal about it. An individual is prevented from boarding an international flight because of ethnicity. Sorry, Russ, you can't get on this plane because you're Irish. It's a violation of my charter rights. You're profiling me based upon my culture, my group, my people. That's a violation of my rights. C is my answer. D, an individual is suspected of committing a crime is taken into custody. That's not a violation because the police suspect you. They have just cause. The only time when your rights are being limited unfairly is C. You can't just take away your freedom to be on a plane because you're Irish. In order to accomplish their goals, all political organizations, democracies and dictatorships, must have an independent court system. No, Hitler didn't have that. Whenever I have to think of dictatorships, I think of Hitler or Stalin. Would Hitler do that? No, Hitler would not do that. A freely elected head of state, Stalin didn't really have that. Media free from government? Well, C and A are saying the same thing, just a different vehicle to hold government accountable. An established process for decision making. So whether you're a dictator or a democracy, we need to know how we're going to make decisions. D is my answer. I have to think through the logic. And that is the end of that.